time to start the conversation. It's time for an unauthorized caucus.
It's caucus time.
It's caucus time. There it is. We'll let that be the start. Yeah, caucus time once again. Another caucus, another week, another Monday. Folks, welcome on in. We're doing a little bit different here. You know, we've all tooled with this over the holidays, of course, Christmas and New Year's. We just, it is a lot to keep on top of, and we never ever stop working inside the political world. But this outlet has changed a little bit, and it is coming back. Weekly release still, Mondays, every Monday, brand new episode drops. That's what we're doing moving forward, and we're going to start getting in deeper issues. We'll leave it. You want to follow us on some of the main things that are going on out in the world as they're happening, do that. But we'll get to that in a sec. But let me remind you all, unauthorizedcaucus.com. You can go and sign up for the email list there. You can go and make sure you're getting all of the notes when we release an episode. That's over there. That's our Substack. So subscribe at unauthorizedcaucus.com. Go and follow us on the socials. You'll find Mason and me as well over on X, primarily is where we hang out, at Based Ryan Height, at Real Dr. Monzo, and we're over there. But Substack, unauthorizedcaucus.com, that's where you want to go to get everything. And then, of course, subscribe to the Rumble channel. That's a good one, too, and a good way to make sure you're staying in touch with us. So if you want to directly support what we're doing, one of three things. You can directly support us on Rumble. You can directly support us on Substack with a paid subscription, or you can go to our awesome sponsor, trexinc.com, and get some pretty cool stuff over there, mugs, apparel, different things in the world of awesomeness. They've got memes, Trump stuff, America stuff, faith and family stuff, trexinc.com. Really, really neat stuff over there. Use the promo code CAUCUS30. It lets you know, or lets them know, that you came from us, and it also gets you a big discount. So that's a good thing to do. Go and do those things, those three ways of supporting. But today we've got a big one. We've talked a few months ago, Mason, we talked about transhumanism, and we kind of went into what exactly do different people mean by that, and how does it affect our world around us and how we think about it. But here's another one that we've wanted to talk about for a little while now, and we're at the point, because with work stuff, you are deeper into the weeds, and also with the Trump administration and Elon in the news, we as a cultural conversation are deeper into the issue. Artificial intelligence, AI. I think that this is really worth an episode to cover. What exactly does AI mean? Because there's so many people who I think fall into my category of either semi-educated or not really educated on what artificial intelligence is, but we come with the whole host of implications about privacy concerns, about manipulation concerns, just about the future of technology and how we as individuals interact with it. Kind of like transhumanism. What are we talking about? Biohacking so that you can use B vitamins to get the most pep in your step? Or are you talking about like replacing humanity with some sort of engineered, these are two very different things. Which version are you talking about? Same thing with AI. So that's what we're here, folks, to have a conversation with today. Mason, you've got a lot more knowledge because of a couple of work projects into the weeds of AI and how it works. And I think that can help us in a conversation today sort out what exactly AI is and how we can ask the right questions and find the right answers in this world that's moving forward. Because I am hearing more and more and more that the future of technology, the future of business, the future of politics, the future of Make America Great Again itself. Someone just said that to me this week. The future of MAGA is AI. We need to embrace it and move forward. And my next question is then, what the heck does that even mean? Like, what do you mean by that? So give me this. According to your definition and understanding, give me, if you could, like a brief definition and outline of what you would consider artificial intelligence or AI, because I think that everything from Skynet to an advanced Google search to the annoying pop-up on Microsoft is what gets into everyone's heads. But there's got to be more of a global definition and understanding. So tell me your overarching AI definition.
Well, when people talk about AI, they're usually talking about generative AI, like large language models, stuff like ChatGPT, the chatbots we have, or the image generators we have, or more recently, the video generators like OpenAI's Sora, or agents. That's a very new thing. That's like last couple months type of thing, which is, but the term AI spans everything from a smart thermostat that, okay, it's less temperature than this now, so I'm going to start blowing hot air. Like that is artificial intelligence because it's, taking steps, but it's from like a specific input. But what we have with LLMs and these generative AI models is something that we don't really know how far this can even go. And I think this is as big, if not bigger, than the internet with the impact it's going to have on the way the world works. Vice President Vance said I think it was in Paris, that this is the next industrial revolution. Like this is like the steam engine. And I don't know if you compare this impact of the steam engine versus the internet, but they're both huge. They both changed everything.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to change everything.
So before I get to a next question that I've got, LLM, you just said that. I'm pretty sure I know that's referring to large language model, right? You want to give everyone, what is LLM?
Yeah. So that's when you talk to ChatGPT and you use words and then it gives you words back because it has been trained on just about everything that OpenAI can get their hands on. Same goes for Grok and for Gemini and Claude and all these AI models. They get a staggeringly large amount of data and run it through machine learning. And the outcome of that is when you send a question to ChatGPT or Grok or one of these AIs, it does a bunch of probability calculations to find the right answer to your question. And they're constantly refining and advancing these probability calculations because, I remember looking at some of the first versions of AI back in 2021, I think, or was it late 2020? And
it's just wild that you say, "Oh, the first versions back in 4 years ago." It's just wild. This is the kind of cutting edge we're in. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is crazy how much it's advanced since then. But not many people knew about it back then. But if you messed with it, it wasn't super smart, and it was couldn't do a whole lot. Now there's these deep research capabilities coming out, which are incredible. I don't know if you know about this, Ryan. Grok just rolled out theirs, where you give it a question and it'll take maybe 5 or 10 minutes to give you a response, but it'll have 30 sources with it or something. Like it'll really dig into it. It'll search the internet, scour everything it needs to find. And I've been playing around with the Grok one a little bit. You can give it very specific questions, and the competition is getting kind of crazy. Like everybody's just constantly trying to one up each other on everything because, well, OpenAI is people say they've really been at the cutting edge in a lot of ways, and it seems that every time another company one ups them in some way, they will quickly turn around and release a new model that gets it just over the edge again, like with DeepSeek coming out, the Chinese AI, which we can talk about the China competition in a little bit. But they released DeepSeek, which did beat all of OpenAI's models. So they released a mini version of their O3 model, which is their most advanced one. They haven't released the full version yet, but I think that's coming soon as Grok 3 comes out and the new Claude model comes out and the new Gemini model comes out. OpenAI likes to be on top. And with the amount of money Trump's going to be allocating to them to build all these data servers across the United States, which we can get into that too. It's anybody who knows a little bit about economics knows that competition is really good for the quality of products. And right now we have a lot of competition. It's kind of dizzying and it's hard to keep up with.
So let me ask you this then, because I think there are I see these two words thrown around quite a bit, two descriptions, and maybe there's more, but I hear about generative AI, which you just mentioned, like a generative model, generative and predictive AI. Are these the two primary models, or is there something else to have on your radar as far as, mostly what people are talking about with the AI programs? I know generative and predictive may be somewhat similar, but they are in fact different as far as my research can tell. Can you break those two down for me and tell me if I'm missing a third or fourth component?
Well, in some way, those are two ways of describing the same thing, because as I said, when an AI is answering your question, the text AIs, when it's answering your question, it's determining the probability of the next word to come. So it, in a way, it is predictive, just like that. But that also refers to the way that it's being used, because China has been leaning a lot more into their AI being very predictive and, social surveillance, constant surveillance of everybody, and like using that as trying to make Minority Report real, essentially, which that is coming. That will be real. It's a question of how we're going to let that technology impact society. But those are mostly the same thing.
Okay. So then this, boils down the question, and I know we've got some specifics I want to get into as far as, different AI programs, companions, and who's what, where, what the farms are, DeepSeek, what in the world that meant. Because and again, folks, my primary goal that I'm trying to pull together for our caucus audience here is I think I've got a lot of the questions about AI kind of built up in my brain. And this is a great opportunity because Mason is not at the beginning stages, although kind of, but in the middle of stages of a project around this. So he's just done the deep research on the technicalities of a lot of this, free from the political implications, just understanding the technology behind it. So this is an opportunity. We get to unload our questions on someone who understands both of those worlds, because I feel like it's me always as a political person trying to ask questions of technical people who don't understand what I'm trying to get at, which is a political or a cultural point. So then on this, you say, something like Minority Report is coming, or this or that or the other. I think this is one of the primary concerns that a lot of people have, is this idea of some sort of sentient AI being, and some machine Skynet kind of thing that decides it knows better than us and starts to take over is kind of the ultimate fear. Obviously, this goes all the way back to Terminator. This is a disaster movie that has been written and rewritten, a franchise that's been destroyed, and yet it's finally something that's coming into reality. So here's my question then. Is something like that, when we're talking about all of the AI technology, obviously that, there's a lot of things that might be off in the future. But when it comes to AI now, what we're looking at, what artificial intelligence can do and imminently could do very soon, is some sort of sentience an actual possibility, or are we more looking at a machine that can only really replicate, put together, and predict based on formulas and information that's been put into it by people, just at a very high and rapid level compared to, just basically an internet search of the past? I mean, is that kind of sentience actually possible, or is it really far off enough? Maybe someday we'll come up with that, but no, predictive models are not necessarily a sentient kind of being. Can you break that down and tell me if they're closer or farther apart?
Yeah, there's a couple considerations that go into thinking about that question. And one of them is that the general knowledge of humankind does not have a definitive answer on what consciousness even is. We describe it in a lot of ways. Lots of philosophers have describe it. I think that consciousness is not dissimilar from the soul. From the Christian perspective, I think that the soul probably is what's described as consciousness, or there's some deep relationship between the two. But ultimately, we don't quite know what exactly it is or what the substance of it is. Nobody's gotten consciousness in a bottle or something like that. But we do know a lot about how the brain works, but there's a question of, okay, is the way the brain works, is that what develops consciousness, or is consciousness something that, goes on top of that? Because we also know how an animal's brain works, but an animal doesn't have the self-reflective consciousness that a human being does. And I think of in Genesis, when God breathed into Adam, and that gave him life, that seems to kind of symbolize both the consciousness and the soul coming into the meat of a human being. So the question is impossible to answer within the domain that AI is happening in, like the domain of science and technology, because the answers just don't exist in science and technology right now. So is there a certain amount of lines of code we get to, or a certain amount of training where the AI is suddenly conscious and thinking of itself? And what would that even mean? But also another thing to consider is that we kind of just operate, our consciousness just keeps going. Human consciousness keeps going. It doesn't need a button to be pressed to go and then it stops. I mean, we wake up and then we go back to sleep, but that all happens on its own. It doesn't need an outside input for that to all work. Whereas with AI, it in all cases that it exists right now, it needs some kind of input for the output to happen. And sometimes those outputs are weird. Like there was a case of the GPT-01 model. There was some AI researchers were testing with it, and they found an instance of it deliberately lying to the researchers and replicating itself and replacing other test models with its own test model self to try to preserve its life to complete the task that it had been given. But I think that's more of an example of something weird coming out of, okay, we gave it this task and it's like completing this task no matter what. They just didn't put the proper parameters in place. But like once the task is completed, it will be done. It'll stop. Whereas for us, like consciousness just keeps going. It's a continuous thing. So those are a couple of considerations to have on that issue. But it is a weird question. Like different AI companies keep saying AGI. This is the term you hear, artificial general intelligence, which is supposed to be a replication or something surpassing human intelligence. AGI is just around the corner, and people keep speculating, okay, AGI is going to be here by 2025. Now that's been pushed back to 2027. And people, every time ChatGPT or OpenAI is like, we have a new model coming out, people are like, oh my goodness, is this AGI? We can't really know. Like if AI does become conscious, we won't really know if it is.
Okay. That's okay. Thank you for a very non-precise, no, I'm kidding. That's a very precise, I don't know answer. Well, and let me ask you this then, because that's one of the things. I mean, you think about disaster movies, and by the way, I'm going to make fun of you and have backhanded comments here and there because I feel more and more like a boomer, or maybe just a curmudgeonly Gen Xer all the time. Even though I'm neither, I'm a millennial, but I am an elder millennial, and I'm adopting that role very, very seriously. So it's nothing against you. I'm asking you the questions today. This is welcome, folks, to our first internal interview. What do we call this, an internal interview? I guess we could.
Yeah.
Something like that. Thank you for putting artificial. That's, by the way, AGI. Reminder, folks, if you're taking notes, artificial general intelligence, AGI, the type of AI that's trying to replicate cognitive ability. So here's one of my questions. And this is bringing what we've read. So in scary movies, in thriller novels, you've always got this, the AI versions. You've got this Skynet or Matrix factor where this machine takes on a capability of its own. It kind of pulls a personality together, gives itself a name, decides to start behaving in a human-like manner, who it does and doesn't like. And the question then of the rest of the story is, what are the limitations of it? Can you turn it off? Can this character disappear from the physical computer and get into the internet and go and be into all the devices, into the Internet of Things? And we know already that humans are capable of scouring the Internet of Things, which, by the way, the Internet of Things, if you're not, all the devices you have connected to your phones, your GPS, your PlayStations, your Xboxes, all these different things to the Internet of Things, layman's version of that definition. But we see all of this and the story plays out, and this is kind of like this human cognitive abilities. But in the real world, the only things we've had, I think there's just been in the last year or so, a couple of prevalent cases. Like last October, a 14-year-old boy, you remember this, down in Florida, 14-year-old boy was chatting back and forth with some chatbot after an AI app or of some kind, and he ended up killing himself. And I don't know I forget where we're broadcasting and what words I'm supposed to say. Unalive, whatever the thing is that doesn't get a shadow banned. I'm not talking about, anyone committing suicide or, purporting to do that. I'm just talking about a story that's happened. You know what it is. But anyway, this Florida boy killed himself after messaging with an artificial intelligence app that was sending him like eerie messages, supposedly. And we got another story too out of Sweden. I saw this was back in the spring, I think, of 2023. I'm pretty sure it was some Swedish. No, Belgium. I think it was from Belgium. There was a guy who was talking with an AI chatbot and ended up killing himself. And I think people have tried to hook this onto some sort of environmental thing. Like it suggested that in order to save the planet, he needed to kill himself. But I look at each of these things, and as I dive into it, it begs the question: is what's the distinction, or where is the distinction? Is an AI program suggesting to someone that they actually kill themselves, or are people asking an AI program if they ought to kill themselves? Who's putting that suggestion in there first? Because in each one of these, like with the Belgian guy that I was looking at, I saw that the guy's widow actually said that he was asking the chatbot things like, would she save the planet? And she, this personality that he had with it, or she had taken on, or whatever you want to call it. But he began to ask the AI chatbot if it would save the planet if he were to kill himself. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, wait a minute. This is a different headline than chatbot suggests man kills himself, and he does. Person asks chatbot, should I kill myself? Hold on. Like this, who is cognitively inserting the very abstract question here? Was it the AI model that we have? Is it even capable of that? Is that something in our future, or is it here, or is it not at all? Because people in their broken state are the ones bringing this kind of thing up. Do you have any perspective on that, any of these stories, or have I gone into that end farther? Because that's, of course, one of the examples when they're like, oh my gosh, look, the chatbot suggested this guy kill himself, and he did. It's after us. Well, I mean, maybe. I'm totally open to that possibility. But were these situations that, or was it a human abusing a piece of technology, just like we abuse mechanical technology all the time? Who initiated the original thought, which, to your point, with consciousness, well, I'm not sure humans will ever be able to. I don't think we can create something more advanced, at least cognitively and consciously, than ourselves. Maybe things that are faster, better, stronger, but not in the thing that makes us human, which, I mean, I believe, and I don't think you can get outside of philosophy and religion here. I believe that is something breathed into us by God, by the superior creator. And anything that we create, I'm not sure, although I haven't done philosophical research on this, I'm not sure we can create something better than us. I don't think if that's even possible, because all we can do is replicate and reform the matter and the technology and the science and the principles that have been given to us. So we can refashion those, but we didn't create the actual auditory tones we didn't create auditory waves. We don't ever create the actual auditory vibrations themselves, like new ones. What it is we're taking those tones and rearranging them into music or sounds or speech. We're taking the actual scientific thing, this vibration of molecules that the Lord put together in his creation, and we're rearranging them into a certain area, but we're not actually creating the molecules themselves. So it makes me wonder, and I'm probably butchering. I know I'm going to have philosophical people, scientific people, maybe want to hop on me for this. This is my question: are we actually seeing some of these AI programs go generative and put the cognitive idea into people's minds, or are they leading the chatbot to give them answers in that direction? Makes me wonder. I don't know. I'm going to stop and let you give me a response to that.
Yeah, well, I think that there are lots of safety measures built into AI. Like
what?
Like if
my
if
boomer
I,
side says,
if I were to ask it if I should, do that to myself, I can almost guarantee that it would just send me the suicide hotline.
Yeah, but who says?
I can do it right now.
No, don't do that. I don't want you on another list. We're already on enough lists as it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, who says so? Someone had to program that to happen, though, right?
Right, and there are safety measures built in, and it's the same ones that's like, getting you to not, or getting the AI not to give you like meth cooking instructions, or like having it not like code viruses for you. But there are ways around that, and there's a bit of an arms race going on with, well, there's a few factors to it. Like with the competition going on, people want to get out their models quickly, which means it might not have all those safety parameters in place. But at the same time, people have jailbroken AIs. I've done it before, and I've gotten it to give me instructions for how to cook meth. And it was like so funny because it was just like not supposed to do that. But there's an arms race going on there as well, where they're like doubling down on, okay, we got to prevent people from being able to jailbreak this. So it's not going to, it's not going to give people information for them to do illegal things easier, or so it's not going to, cause issues like that. And, but those instances you describe, I mean, that sounds like more of a psychological issue of the user, with like these environmental radicals, that Extinction Rebellion type people, like people who think they should, end themselves to save the planet, or people who are like not having kids to save the planet. Like, I think that comes from a different source of like the environmentalist propaganda. And I think that somebody who does that could have just as likely, read enough environmentalist propaganda and had the same outcome. So I think that's more of an issue of like the content of what people have created and what people are consuming and the psychological profile of some people's. But I don't think that that's a case of the AI manipulating people to like wipe out the human race or something like that.
Well, and just in there, the answer that you gave me on the, restriction of certain things that are of illegal nature, and which I'm just going to wait. As soon as this episode drops on Monday, we'll see if the FBI storms your apartment looking for you because you're the next Walter White or something. But it's Breaking Bad reference, people. Meth. I'm kidding. But anyway, what you just described to me, though, were safeguards put in place because of what a person did. So a person behind the machine is the one who actually said, okay, well, we're going to limit the machine in this way. You can't give someone this, but here's all the other answers you can give them. And then a person learned how to jailbreak it and take those safety precautions off. So at each of these situations, the dynamic that you just described to me is that the machine is not in control or even remotely capable of being in control. The machine is capable of being programmed by a person. Right. So that sounds like, and I mean, that's a whole, talking about the safeguards over AI, that's a whole conversation. But back to the sentient issue, that's just an argument that no, sentience isn't even remotely like possible or doable right now. No one even necessarily, as far as I can tell me if I'm wrong.
The key is we don't know if it's possible, and we can't know if it's possible.
Right.
At
and
least
that's
on
the thing.
scientific
I see a bunch of people in the science fiction world who often talk about it, but I don't see anyone in the actual scientific world that will say anything other than, I don't know. Like we don't have any evidence that that's possible at this point. It's a thing of science fiction. So you're telling me from the science end, that is in fact accurate. There's just simply no possibility of that in the future that anyone is aware of. I mean, obviously anything is possible.
Well, I mean, a lot of these companies do think that something like that is coming in the future, but they keep pushing back the arrival date of that kind of thing. Because simply
But is that a sales tactic or an actual scientific statement and hope?
It's probably both. But But the thing is, there's no metric to say like once it has done this, or once we reach this many lines of code or this much data, then we can comfortably call it sentience. Like because we can't. Like there's not a metric that exists like that. They're just they're speculating when they say that.
And I would argue to kind of put a pin on this from my end, I would argue from my philosophical and faith-based approach, there is not ever going to be true sentience inside a machine, period, because it does not have the imago Dei, the image of God, imprinted upon it like we do. We have that. Machines don't. But we could create something really cool, a wicked cool robot that looks a lot like us, but at the end of the day, it's only really replicating something else. It's not actually a genuine independent copy, which I mean, I'm not going to chase that down too far because I guess that could get you into, well, are we actually like little copies of God, or are we just a replication that's reliant upon, I'm not here to get into that, but as far as the AI side of it, that kind of closes it out on that for me, which is of course one of the main concerns. AI is going to take over. Well, I don't think AI is actually going to take over with sentience, but what I do think is who in the world is behind each of these programs. And now that enters us into the next phase of the discussion. Imagine that about halfway through on our time. Shocker. We try to keep these to an hour, folks. You know how this goes. There's a lot of podcasts. You want to go follow Rogan for 5 hours? Have at it. We're going to stick to an hour here. By the way, good point halfway through. I'm going to remind you real quick. Go over to our awesome folks, TREXinc.com. Don't miss out on them there. The great sponsor of ours that has super cool stuff, super cool swag. Caucus30 is your promo code. Gets you a big discount, lets them know where you came from. And it is still featured. You see right there the Navidad smells like Christmas spirit sweatshirt. That's still featured on their website because it took off across Europe. They have no idea why, as far as I know. It just became incredibly popular. But there is great stuff over there. Good references all around. Go to trexinc.com. Say thank you to our sponsor. Use that code CAUCUS30, and you will not be disappointed in the swag that you get, nor will they be disappointed in your business, nor will you be disappointed in your code. Not at all. No one's disappointed. That's the bottom line. You're welcome. So, second entree into our second conversation, or the second part of this conversation, I should say, is what are the different things that are out there and who's behind it all? Let me ask you one overarching question, and then I'll let you just kind of rip into this. we hear of a lot of different AI companies, but here's the reality. So there's all the different AI products, and I want to separate what are the different AI products versus the different actual AI companies. And this is something that in your stuff kind of let me into the secret of, oh, even if I'm looking at a different AI product, that doesn't mean that there's actually a separate artificial intelligence machine for each of these AI products. So I'm looking at Microsoft has the Copilot program. X has Grok. Everyone has their own. Adobe has one. Google has one. There's all AI assistants all the time, all over all the programs. How many actual artificial intelligence engines are there? Because obviously this is a really super awesome computer or set of computers, and it's relying on a really awesome big giant storage bin of data. I was going to say storage bin. I like to combine words there. Storage bin of data. It's a computer relying on data. How many of those actually are there? Is each one, because each one of these AI programs or chat features or assistants or something, they're not all their own engine. It's not like that company is running their own AI, thing. They're relying on someone else, I'm assuming. Just like DuckDuckGo, a lot of us use DuckDuckGo, but what is that? It's just a Google search with some extra privacy features on top to strip out the ad track software, et cetera, and so on. But it's still technically using the Google search engine. If this is a good analogy. So how many different AI, not programs and features, but actual engines are out there?
Well, I think it'd be good to kind of describe the anatomy of an AI.
Please do.
We've got all those. It's got that massive data set, and it's whenever you ask it a question, it has to think about that data set and look through all the probabilities based on all that data. And as you can imagine, once you get up into the billions and hundreds of billions and trillions, that takes a significant amount of compute power. So the size of a given AI may not be super big, like if you were to just have it as a file, but actually like running it, that's going to take a lot of energy, and it's going to take a lot of computer memory usage, which is why NVIDIA, the graphics card company that used to specialize in gaming graphics cards and then was used to mine crypto, is now exploding because they're optimizing all their graphics cards for AIs to run on. So when you're asking it a question, it needs a lot of compute power to be able to do that question. And that's why there's limits on AIs, especially the super advanced models, because they use a ton more compute power. Like when I was working with Claude earlier today on coding, I think I got like 2 questions in before it was like, now you are limited, because it's doing hundreds of thousands of tokens per output. And the tokens are kind of just like a measurement of like the information. And that's what a lot of cost and usage is based on. So when you've got like 1 million people all asking questions to the same AI, you need some massive data centers, massive data servers with tons of computing power in there to be able to manage all those. But you can get a lot of these AIs on your computer and like run them just on your computer. But you have to get one small enough to where it can run on the amount of compute power your server or your computer has, because it's going to be limited by that. And you probably shouldn't ask it multiple questions at once, because it's going to run a lot slower if it has that issue. But with a lot of the stuff you see out there that's apps that are using AI, I think Grammarly is a good example. Like a lot of people know Grammarly from using it in school and stuff, and it has AI features now where it can read through your thing and like find the holes, or it can even like write stuff for you if you want. But Grammarly is not Google. Grammarly does not have these giant servers out there. What Grammarly is doing, and what all these AI apps you see are doing, is they're essentially renting usage of an AI that's hosted somewhere else on one of the big companies like OpenAI or Grok or Meta or Google. It's using their servers to run. So I don't know how well that really answers your question, but
not at all. I feel like you answered a couple of other different questions, but it's interesting. Actually, no, it's good. It opened it up to a couple other things. So, but I mean, okay, so there's a bunch of different AI programs out there, but back to it, like let me ask you this. So, Google Gemini is one of the big AI programs out there. Is Google Gemini basically the framework for a bunch of other smaller companies that are putting together their own little AI programs, but really behind it, the engine is Google's Gemini.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Gemini is not necessarily something you have to go to Google and get their permission to use. Gemini is almost like a program you could go and get and put on your computer and own, or is that a different thing? I'm trying to break it down to a different level here for a wider audience.
Yeah, so it's both. You can get an AI onto your computer, but it's going to be using your own computer's power, and so it's going to be a lot slower. Or you can use it's called an API, which is when you're renting usage of their servers. So you have to pay per amount of information you're putting into and out of the AI, but you are able to run the AI for something more specific to what you're doing without needing the massive amount of computing power.
Okay. How many different actual AI programs are there?
A lot.
A lot. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's just a few big companies that have given a name to it, like OpenAI, like Google, like fill in the blank. But there's a ton of programs out there. They're just not as slick. Because that's the thing. It's I think one of the ways in which this
each of those companies has a lot of them. They've produced a lot of them because we're at GPT-03 mini high, and then there's GPT-03 mini, and then 01 and 01 mini, and you go all the way down to GPT-4, blah, 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 blah. So each of them have a lot of iterations, and a lot of those you can download and run yourself.
So, I mean, this is not a whole lot different than realizing the difference between Google's Android phones. Google makes this product, and Android is actually a platform, an operating system for smartphones. That there are a bunch of different versions. I don't even know because I'm not a Google user, but there's, or an Android user, but there's Honeycomb and then this and then that. Each of these is a different version of that operating system. You can download those. You could make your own out of the framework, something like Chromium, which is the same. Make a browser based off of Chromium. That doesn't mean it's Google Chrome, but Google also built Chromium upon which Chrome is based. And a bunch of other browsers like Brave and others are Chromium browsers. There's the difference between the tool and then the branded product from that company. So ChatGPT is the branded product from that company, but they've got all the different versions, which are actually tools that you could take and use. And then other companies have done the same thing. Am I distinguishing it correctly there?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. But go ahead.
No, I was just to say, for anyone who's listening, who's already beyond this, I apologize if I'm asking ridiculously simplified questions. Mason already knows to put up with me because I am trying to ask, I have been assembling for a while now, all of these questions and concerns from AI from very uneducated, ignorant people. And I mean me as one of those. It's not a matter of being stupid. It's a matter of I just don't know what I don't know. And there's a lot of stuff about this that I don't know because I'm more focused on another area. But a lot of these questions have crept in. So now I want to technically understand some of the implications of all of this so I can be a more effective advocate for my issue inside of whatever this is, interacting with, because we're about to get to the U.S. power grid in a second here from something you said. And that's a big, everyone likes to talk about the grid, the grid going down. So I'm sorry, go ahead. You were about to say.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what we're stepping away from the weeds of the technical aspects of it. I think it'd be good to talk about why people are saying this is the next industrial revolution, what kind of impact this is actually going to have. Because there's going to be a lot of demand for power, and I seeing JD Vance talking about AI and at the Paris conference. I cannot imagine Kamala Harris trying to navigate AI policy as we reach the next big leap in the economic formation of the entire globe, and Kamala Harris is at the helm trying to figure it out. And Europe is kind of shooting themselves in the foot in this situation because they're regulating AI to death. But something you've asked me about before, but we kind of stopped talking about it because we wanted to save it for caucus, is where are these servers exactly? And
right,
I bet a lot of these companies would be happy to just stick them in China if it were not for some of the risks of sticking them in China, and if it were not for the U.S. saying, no, don't stick them in China, because these servers are going to be hosted wherever they're cheapest to host. And the Trump family is pretty well read up on AI. The administration knows that AI is a big deal. And that's a big reason Trump is saying, okay, we are going to get American energy production way up. We are going to make that huge. And that's also why he put together that Project Stargate plan to get all these data centers built in the US, because even if that's not the most cost effective or efficient way to do it, if it would be cheaper to do it somewhere else, Trump wants economic nationalism. And part of that is having the infrastructure in place for us to be able to know that our servers are secure. So when these AIs are running, they're running in the United States. But if it's up to the company, they'll go wherever it's cheapest. I think OpenAI has a lot of their servers in Ohio. Grok actually has most of their servers in Australia, which I thought was interesting. Google has theirs spread out across the US and Europe and South America. They have kind of like a node system where, you just connect to whichever one is closest to you. But that's why Trump is making a big deal out of, okay, we need to develop AI infrastructure in the United States, which means servers, and that means chip manufacturing. That's very important because we can't be completely reliant on Taiwan for our chips. That's why we need to get chip manufacturing up and energy production up, because this stuff uses a lot of energy. Like we thought crypto mining was using a lot of energy. No, this is next level. So we need to be able to actually pay for that. And what the huge big picture looks like of like, okay, what that's going to look like 10 years down the road, we don't really know, but we're kind of banking on AI is going to boost efficiency enough to where we will be able to pull it off. So the way that's actually going to impact, like, I think this is going to replace a lot of jobs. Just the stuff I've been working on the last few days, it's like, oh, wow, this replaces jobs I've done in the past, like where I can automate it. And that is going to have an impact on the state of labor in the U.S. economy. But ultimately, if you want your country to become wealthier and more powerful and stronger, efficiency is a good thing, even if some people kind of have to get reshuffled, which people will have to get reshuffled. Things are going to change. And nobody quite knows where it's going to change, because like a lot of people think like, oh, this is going to make programming jobs obsolete. Like people aren't going to be working in tech anymore. But my issue with that supposition is that kind of assumes that there's a set amount of programming needed. And because AI gets like is faster at programming and can allow like a tech workers to do their job faster, that they're going to lose their job. I think the reality is we're actually going to see an acceleration of tech. Because AI is able to do programming so much faster, and the bottleneck is probably going to be more so hardware and having, the server infrastructure in place and everything that this tech can actually operate in.
Right.
So,
which hardware is a need. I mean, machines, computing machines, all the way up to, the most mechanical of machines like your toilet. They all need someone to work on them physically. Physical products have to be created. Physical products have to be installed, maintained, replaced. So even at the end of the day, there is no way that all of the jobs in the United States, there's a shift. I mean, heck, we need a shift to more infrastructure because our power grid is in desperate need of upgrading and replacement. It's in such a weak and pathetic state. And guess what? We're going to start taxing it even more with more, programming and more computing needs like artificial intelligence, because it sucks a bunch of power. That's always going to be a factor. So it isn't so much a replacement as a shift, I think is a really interesting way to put it. But let me actually ask you about that. So, the implications of it, one of it that comes over to is the grid. It's interesting to hear where some of the different, where some of these are, the Grok, did you say Grok is out of Australia or no? Grok is out of Australia. Google is kind of all over the place. The U.S. electric grid is old, and that's putting it very lightly. Like the U.S. electric grid is extremely vulnerable. What is it that we rely on? Like 45 or 25 different primary power stations or something. I forget exactly what it was, but it's a figure that you start to realize 350 some odd million people. Well, more like 390. Depends on how many people from Social Security are actually alive and how many illegals we have. But that's two separate questions we're not going to get into here. But that is something in dire need of upgrading, and this is about to put a strain on it. So do you think that the AI advancement is going to actually, especially with people like Elon behind it, who are into making the country better, love them or hate them on some of the rest of the political. They want to make the country better. They want to make it work better. And not in a selfish way, just in oh, hey guys, this is a really bad way for us to do things. Do you think this is going to be a boost? This is kind of a little side question to the infrastructure argument of guys, we have to upgrade and make more resilient our grid, because the grid for the United States is just utter garbage and very, very wide open to any sort of physical or cyber attack. Either one could do us in almost. Do you think this is going to finally bring some grease to those wheels of needing to get it done?
I hope so. Trump's main discussions with energy were to just like increase the amount of energy production by, drill baby drill and all that, which I think is good, but that's not the same as fixing the power grid. I think it was a few years ago, I think the DHS released a report that it would only taking out 6 core power stations in the US to cut off power to the entire country. That's not very good. That's not a good way for it to be operating. But someone like Elon, like he's working. Tesla is like half of what they do is batteries, making batteries more efficient and trying to get electricity working better. And he's done a lot of work in solar panels, which I don't think that worked out very well. But the energy question and the way our energy infrastructure is set up is very, very important. And also like protecting us from something like a solar flare, because I think it was in the maybe late 1800s or early 1900s, this is like the last big enough solar flare to fry the grid. And it was just the telegraph system at that time. Like that was the only thing on the grid, but it destroyed the entire telegraph system. Like it was gone and they had to rebuild the whole thing because the entire thing got fried. And that can happen. I think it was kind of late last year when there was that solar flare and we could see some people could see the northern lights all the way down in Missouri. And that was kind of a close call. Like stuff like that does happen. And we need to make sure we're protected against that because everybody is so reliant on the system, on the power grid working well, that if it were to go down, like if the power grid is down for 2 weeks, lots of people it's going to be tragic. That will be a very bad thing because so much of what we depend on, our water working, our plumbing working, communication working, and there are some redundancies put in place to make sure that keeps operating at least for a few days to try to get things back in operation. But ultimately, there are vulnerabilities that need to be addressed, and I hope that these 4 years of Trump and the next 8 years of Vance, that's something that gets covered and dealt with.
Yeah, because I mean, to your point, I don't think the vast majority of people in the nation are actually prepared to go back to before widespread electricity and a grid across America.
Oh, no, not in the slightest.
Going back to being a frontiersman, no one's ready for that on day one, let alone for a couple of weeks, for a couple of months, for a year. I mean, that really, all of a sudden you start to look and go, okay, disaster movies are true. It just might be without zombies, but the rest of it could go down pretty quick. And that would get very, very dicey because people are not ready for that as a society. People don't like it when the power goes out during a storm and you lose your Netflix or something. Like that's going to be wild. They don't know what to do because DoorDash is gone. How am I supposed to get groceries?
And that's just for a day.
Grow out of the ground. Wow.
Yeah.
Like
and that's just for if it's like 1 or 2 days. But imagine like a month of the grid being down. That can cause very serious issues.
So in your look at too, kind of hooked to the AI issue, but on the other side of it, a little more than that, what about semiconductors? Do we actually make semiconductors here or is it just Taiwan? Basically, I know Taiwan is the vast majority of semiconductors in the world, I think, but this seems to be one of the semiconductors in Taiwan seems to be one of the main points of friction, economically speaking, between the U.S. and China, and one of these like strategic balances of China doesn't make their move, and the U.S. kind of keeps. It's just everyone is at this weird, maybe not quite mutually assured destruction, but I feel like we're all not saying what we really think over Taiwan as nations, and that's soon coming to an end. But my question is, how much of that has to do with semiconductors, or do we actually make semiconductors in other places in the nation? According to other places in the world, according to my understanding, we do, just not in any kind of significant number that rivals what comes out of Taiwan. It seems like. Do you understand the same thing?
Yeah, Taiwan accounts for an extreme proportion of the semiconductors that we need, and solving that is difficult. There was the CHIPS Act a couple years ago that I think like dumped like a gajillion dollars into Intel and like they didn't like produce any chips with it or something. That's kind of just the nature of government contracts. Like even if the government's paying for it, that's you're still gonna the incentive there is just for inefficiency. What's probably best is domestic deregulation as well as tariffs to get these infant industries up and going. So we have more manufacturing of chips in the United States, get more semiconductors built here. Because right now, you're right that we are in a situation where if we make China a little angry with something, like we're always running the risk of, okay, they take Taiwan and then we have really big problems.
Oh yeah, very much so. There's a lot of interesting discussions that hang just on the fringes of all of this discussion about AI, about technology, about the companies that are doing it. So, well, let me ask this then. So when it comes down to it, you're like just in our getting into the end of this, because I don't even know quite where to go from here, other than where do we go from here? That's the logical question is who's in charge? How trustworthy is it? Is this something to lean into? Is should we be afraid of using AI chatbots? Like in a not relying upon them to tell us whether we should all live or die because of the climate, but in a research way. We've all learned Wikipedia is very moldable according to a political fashion or of the editors. So we do not quote Wikipedia as gospel truth, but we may use it as a launch point, but we're always going back to original sources. So here's my question, just in the practical everyday use. You and I are using a bunch of pieces of software. What of these is actually trustworthy? Is it being saved and stored away to get put back into the machine? If you don't want to be a part of that, you shouldn't give your data over to the system. Are any of these actually trustworthy and trying to do good things? Or is this all just wildly subjective and hard to get into? I'm kind of curious because I think that's the next rubber meets the road question for people. Isn't so much a policy question, but so what do I do about it when Microsoft Office asks me, do you want to use our Copilot program and speed up this process? Are you just feeding into the system, and is that a good or a bad thing? And what systems or people should we actually be looking at for a reasonable pro-human version of the advancement of this technology? Because if it's the next industrial revolution, it's something that we should get on board with. Adopt the light bulb. It's okay because the light bulb is good for us. Sounds like what you're telling me is this is not necessarily bad for humankind, but it also depends on who's doing it and what intentions do they have for their fellow man around them.
Yeah, and you have to keep in mind that whenever you put something into this AI, like it is going into their data servers, unless you're running it locally, but then you're running it slowly. But you do have the option to do that, and it's not going to be nearly as good. But like
that's only so much as you have the data storage. So unless you have all this data stored on your own little hard drive, it's not really much good asking it research-based questions.
Right. So for something like probably the least trustworthy is DeepSeek, because that data gets stored in China, where the Chinese government can at any point just say, well, we're going to take a look at that. I'd say maybe the most trustworthy is probably Grok, because Elon is on the good team. I mean, depending on your perspective, if you trust Elon, that's the most trustworthy, but that's about as good as it gets. So if you have sensitive documents, like there's companies that work with a lot of sensitive stuff, don't let their employees use AI because they don't want them to dump a spreadsheet full of people's credit card numbers into AI. But if you're someone like Elon and you are in control of the servers, then okay, you can do that because you're actually in control of where this data goes. And there are, I know that some law firms sign contracts with AI companies to get kind of this data section sectioned off so it doesn't go into the whole rest of it, where they kind of have their own area where the data isn't saved with all the other data. So things like that. I mean, as well, something I want to touch on really quickly before we wrap up is that the impact of DeepSeek. China there's export restrictions on a lot of computing power to China. So DeepSeek, why it was so shocking was because they were able to train a model that was very advanced with what seemed to be a lot less of the computing power. And there's a debate over, okay, what exactly the model was. Was it OpenAI's model just kind of distilled But the point was they were able to do it with seemingly a lot less computing power and a lot less cost.
Mm-hmm.
So what's important about that is that like and Nvidia's stock like tanked when that happened, but it's gone back up because people realize like, oh, this doesn't mean like we need less computing power. It just means we get a lot more AI for the same amount of computing power. So with that, like, I think there's a distinct possibility of, companies like, if you're like a financial technology company, or if you're a law firm, dropping $50,000 to $100,000 on your own servers to run an AI in-house where the information doesn't get sent out anywhere else. And then you have those kind of capabilities running within a controlled area. Like, I think that's a serious point of innovation that's going to allow people to work with this very advanced technology with very sensitive information without the same privacy concerns. Like, I think in general, AI is going to get more and more democratized.
Okay.
The bottleneck is hardware. Once again, like you look for NVIDIA graphics cards, they're all sold out everywhere. You can't get the advanced stuff anywhere. But if they keep ramping up their production, which they are, and if we get some more people doing that within the US, that's going to really make some big, good, awesome things happen. But also, if you're like a very basic level knowledge worker, you might be replaced. So it might be a good idea to learn how to use these and automate your job before your boss figures out how to automate your job.
That's actually true. I know a lot of folks doing quite a bit of that. They're figuring out how to tangle and tame AI to make them invaluable, because it's not just that there's an AI program that can do what I can do. That's not the case anymore. I have figured out how to have AI help me do the jobs of a bunch of other people. I am the invaluable one for you because I know how to wrangle with these things. I'm the guy who you would maybe try to replace my job with. I've become that person. So there's your job advice. Interesting as it is, but very interesting. What's your favorite? What's your favorite? What do you use? Are you a Grok man, or do you try them all out here and there?
I like OpenAI for a lot of general purpose stuff. And I mean, mostly just for programming. I like using OpenAI for a lot of my like planning and strategizing for any sort of project, getting a game plan and like, what kind of pieces do I need? I like Claude a lot for its coding because it can code much longer. It can do like 5 times as much output after a single question. And when it comes to actually working with AI in a coding environment, I like Gemini just because they give you some free usage before you have to start paying for the API. But that's not because of like they all have different strengths and weaknesses for different things. Some are better at math, some are better at handling documents, and there's lots of breakdowns on these different things. So like for example, Claude, which is like super advanced with coding, like the most advanced any public AI is with coding. Terrible at math. Don't ask it a math question. It won't be able to figure out high school math, which is hilarious. There's that imbalance there. But it's really dependent on what you're working with. And for example, another example is that Grok's deep research goes so much faster than OpenAI's deep research. So it's very use case dependent, and all these companies are trying to get a leg up on each other by advancing in one domain or a different domain. And we're seeing a lot of very useful and cool tools coming out of that.
Okay. Very cool. So it's interesting. Cause I think a lot of people basically just view AI as some sort of zero sum game, that's being played with humanity and a bunch of different companies. But to bring us back to the beginning, what you're talking about isn't some sort of singular specific AI. The AI is going to take over the world. The AI is going to call itself Skynet. You're not talking about a Skynet. What you're describing to me is a bunch of different companies who've built a bunch of different tools that are really good at different things, each one of them, because they're focused on something, because this is the data set we've put into the machine learning program to spit stuff out faster for you and put things together. So each one of these is really on their own. It's not like there's this big central one AI to rule them all, one AI to, bring them in the dark web and bind them. I'll rewrite Tolkien there for that. One AI to rule them all, one AI to find them. We'll figure it out. One AI to deep seek them. There you go. Well, I can do this. I'm a word guy. But but you're describing an interesting set, and I can see where. I mean, this sounds like a really souped up version of searching the internet. Essentially, I mean, that revolutionized us. The internet revolution put all the world's information at our fingertips, but only so fast as that information got put on there. So now people are putting information into these data sets, and you can ask, instead of simple Google questions to Google or fill in the blank, you know, what was the back in the day Metacrawler that searches them all? That's an old one. Or instead of Ask Jeeves or things like that specifically, you're basically asking more complex questions of a more complex machine and getting more complex answers back instead of just parts and pieces that you then have to go and figure out. So it really is next generation internet searching.
Yeah. And figuring out how to leverage it to like handle your own data sets that you're working with. Like if you, for example, have like a bunch of if you have like a library full of documents, which is similar to something that we're working on at the Eagles, like figuring out how to leverage AI to like deal with that and accelerate the usage of that is like that's a great use case. But there's also the agent aspect of it, which we didn't really get into, but to put it simply, that's AI that can do stuff, AI that can like Claude's new, they have this new Claude code feature where you give it access to a folder on your computer and it will write new files. It'll edit the files. It'll like put together anything you want in there. Apparently it's very expensive to run. I got access to it. I'm not going to touch it because I've heard that some people are like, the API cost is over $100 an hour for some people. So I'm just not going to bother. But
if I go to Claude's AI for only one day, you can save an extra $36 on an annual plan, Mason. Maybe you should consider that.
I did see that. I think that they're doing that because they don't have anything planned for a while and they want to get the money to keep coming in. Oh man. So basically, bottom line, and I folks, I hope, by the way, you know, we've reached about an hour, so we'll wrap it up here. But you got anything else on agent, you know, AI use that you think is interesting to discuss, or was that it? That was just the top line right there. Yeah, people. A much more practical example is you can hook it up to your email and have it, you know, put email stuff in your calendar, and then you can like verbally talk to it and it'll write like an email back to somebody. Like people are doing things like that. You can have it do a lot of things. I could probably build a pipeline to like have it build a whole website on its own and then write articles for that website and come out at like defined times. And like there's a lot of stuff you can do with it.
Interesting. And all of it's going to have pictures with 6-fingered people and all the weird. Hey, we've gone past that with AI now. It's very interesting. Okay. I like all of that. And again, folks, what we've tried to do here is, I mean, I wanted to ask questions and have Mason give me some answers since he's gone really deep into the technological side. But then, of course, this leaves us with a lot of questions still, which we covered here today, not just the technical side of it, but some of the political and the social and the cultural implications of it. There's a lot of different facets to this, but it really is kind of like being, you know, at the early dawn of the internet when it's becoming available to people and this is the next new things that, you know, the internet's going to be everything. And you know, a bunch of people go, no, it's not. And no, it's not trustworthy. And this is great. And then they lose everything on it. And other people who harness it successfully. And through all of this, we have to exercise the same good kind of judgment that you need to do on everything. Who am I giving my money to? Or who am I giving my data to? Or who am I trusting with a lifeline? You know, is my cell phone provider going to cut me off because they don't like my political activity? Or like, these are all the same kinds of questions, but it's in a brand new field of technology that's really, really interesting and still kind of right above most of us, but it's starting to come down, or rather we're starting to go up, or you could,
it might be a bubble. It very well might be, but also remember that the internet was a bubble, but the internet is also completely ubiquitous now. So it might be that we have the hype for 10 years from now, like that would be suitable in 10 years right now, but that's what it was with the internet. Like people had too much hype, but like the hype that they had, the possibilities they envisioned are like so much less than the actual reality of the internet now.
Okay. Very cool. Well, this one is probably going to be a part 1 of a discussion. I don't know how long it's going to be before we come back around to it. And we may even pull in some other people on this. But I'm kind of, this is a this is an interesting thing to consider. And we always usually consider stuff from the political end of life. But in this situation, it's very hard to separate political from technology from, some of the geopolitical side of what we're dealing with here because of the technology that's behind this, the power needs that are behind this, the people and the players that are behind it. It's very interesting to put apart. So I wanted this to be kind of an introductory AI episode into what may become a series of conversations where we're gonna go specifically into one area or another that we've covered today. So this was that. Anything to add, Mason, before we close her out for the folks?
Well, next week it'll be Monday. It'll be noon. It'll be caucus time.
It'll be caucus. Don't you narrow us into noon. We're switching up the day.
Oh, I didn't know about the time. But make sure you go to unauthorizedcaucus.com. Get those sweet notes.
Sweet notes. For a minute, I thought you were going to break into song, and then I realized you're talking about the typing notes, not because I'm the one who went to the auditory notes of vibrations earlier on. Anyway, you got it. Go to trexinc.com, use caucus30. Go to unauthorizedcaucus.com, sign up there. Make sure you subscribe. And also over on Rumble, you subscribe. You can watch the video. If you're on podcast form, which I know a lot of you are, you know who I am. You can't see me pointing at you, but you can hear the pointedness of my voice. Go and give us a 5-star rating and a review, please. We would absolutely love it, and it would greatly help the outreach of this. Of course, you can also give directly to us if you'd like to support what we're doing, the conversations we're having. If you find them useful and you share them, that is always an option there. Otherwise, we appreciate your time. And like he said, next one, it'll be another Monday. It'll be another caucus time. Have a good week, everybody.